chair, to the councilman, we evaluated that during our pilot projects, which was in 13 and also in 14. During that particular process and pilot program, we did evaluate, we did talk to the officers. As a matter of fact, in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, during the pilot program, what we did after the program was completed, we brought the officers in so we can debrief them. The majority, if not 99% of the officers, although some were very skeptical initially, once they got the units, they were very happy that they had it. They didn't want to give them up, but we had to take it back from them because it really helped them. It helped them self-evaluate themselves when they reviewed their actions with the citizens, and it also caused citizens who were somewhat hostile towards the officers, once they realized that they were being recorded, their attitudes changed and so forth. So yes, we went through that process. We talked to the officers involved in the pilot programs, get their thoughts and attitudes towards the units themselves.
Did you also, through the chair, thank you, could we have a copy of that? Is that in your evaluation process?
That's to the chair, to the councilman, as part of our evaluations. A lot of it was informal, councilman. We brought them into a room similar to this, put them at a table, and we talked about it. So a lot of it was informal.
Yeah, because we need that. When you bring it to the 5th district or the 3rd district, you look at lessons learned, what the other officers had to say about it, with their behavior and attitude. That attitude and motivation means a lot. Saying that, through the chair, to D.C. Drummond, to me, the most important individuals for this is your sergeants. It's the frontline supervisors. Here's the reason why. You're narrating policy, and that frontline supervisor is the one that's over the patrol officers as well as the investigators. Your frontline supervisors, the sergeants, always are out there up front talking with the patrolmen. So you pushing policy, that sergeant is also talking with people on the streets. So the sergeant is the one to make sure that the systems are going through and that the systems are being monitored and controlled. And the sergeant, the frontline supervisor, he or she is so important, will let you know if there's any glitches in our systems.
To the chair, Councilman, you're absolutely right, Councilman. The sergeants, the frontline supervisors are absolutely the key. You're right. Our sergeants, which are primarily our frontline supervisors, are the key to just about everything we do. They have probably the most difficult job in the department, and part of that's that we make policy in the command staff, and it's incumbent upon our supervisors, especially our frontline supervisors, to push that policy through. So they are the key. So our responsibility in the command staff is to ensure that we give them the tools that they need, which includes primarily the training. So we're going to train our frontline supervisors up, not just our frontline, all our supervisors up, to have the ability and the tools necessary to make sure that this project that we have is going to be successful.
You know what, the sergeants, we could create a warning system. The warning system will let us know that we can better monitor and control the behavior of the workers. For example, if the union, CPPA, push against it, the sergeants or the frontline workers will let us know there's glitches in our systems. Have you guys created that? Did you create that in the 4th district? Through the chair to D.C. Drummond.
Through the chair to the councilman, yes, we have a system in place to audit footage on a regular basis. That frontline supervisor has to look at a certain percentage of the footage for his troops on a regular basis, and to note issues that happen as they come along. But there's also some other mechanisms within the division that are in place to monitor officers' behavior.
Great, great, great. I want to say this, and then I'll yield to back to the chair. There's another piece that is very, very good. Matter of fact, I legislated it 4 to 5 years ago.
That's why it's good.
Yeah, you're right. That's why it's good. The county just pushed it through for their new 911 system, Mr. Chairman and Mr. President. It's called Next Generation. Right? Are you familiar with that, Jones, through the chair? The Next Generation is a bad piece.
Yeah.
What it will do is you'll pick up your cell phone, right? Take a picture of an issue or concern. A citizen can do it. Take the pictures, they'll see it, snap it, send it right over to intake.
Yep.
Intake would take it forward to the dispatcher, and the dispatcher will forward it to the police officer in real time.
Yep.
And you can do it with the video also. That way, if there's any systems failures that happened way back, you know what I'm talking about, this new technology, the next generation, then the officers will be able to see what's going on in real time through video. And that way, through expert judgment, they could call and ask for another car to show up, or they could take it from a priority 1 to a priority 2, because things change through the chairman to the police chief. You can make a phone call and say there's an issue or concern, but when the police officer get there, it's totally different than when the intake person has said. But with that next generation, and you connect it to the police car, you can actually see what's going on. And you would have, let's say, participatory government working with the police officers hand in hand. This piece here with the body camera is good, but check that next generation out. Matter of fact, it's on point.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for your advocacy. Councilman Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, first of all, thank you for putting together this committee and allowing the members of City Council to see what the residents in our community have seen over the last 2. This is my 3rd time seeing it, so I'm appreciative of learning more and more everywhere along the way. Let me first the training. How many hours are the officers going to be required for training for the body cameras?
DC Morrow.
Chair, to the council member, training is at least 4 hours.
So in 4 hours, what consists of the training? Let me ask that for 4 hours.
To the chair, the council member, it consists of primarily the first portion of our training, approximately 2 hours, is the functionality of the system itself. That's done by a representative from TASER, goes through the use of it, and also a part of the 2-hour training initially by the representative from TASER is actually tagging, which is actually going into evidence.com, tagging the video and so forth, so they can find the video relatively simple. The functionality is easy. The flagging of or tagging of the video as well is relatively simple. Generally doesn't take 2 hours. We allot 2 hours, but it's because the functionality and ease of use is very simple. The officers get through that relatively quick. Next, our training section, academy officers are there, and they're instructing our officers on the policies. The new body camera policy as well as a related policies as well, and then they answer questions. And then there is a test that the officers take at the end to make sure that they understand the policy.
So in 4 hours, they learn how to use the mechanism, the body cam.
Actually, so yes, it's a part of that, but again, because the units are really simple to use, that goes by really quick, and we get into the policy. So, but in that 4 hours or 5 hours, it's about the use, the functionality of it, as well as the policy. If I can add, I'm part of the committee, and during the process, we did visit a couple of cities. We went to Salt Lake City, that has a camera system, as well as Fort Worth. While we were at Salt Lake City, part of what our plan was to actually ride along with a couple officers. The plan was that morning, we actually went to the police station. The officers were being trained that particular day. They wanted us to arrive about 11 a.m. The officers started training, I believe, at 9. By 10:30, we were actually on the road with the officers. They had just gotten the cameras, and they actually trained less than 2 hours, and they were actually on the road with the cameras, actually capturing footage and uploading in less than 2 hours. So again, it's because the ease of use with the particular unit is a relatively simple technology, and we wanted that as part of our RFP to make sure it's relatively simple. Good technology, but relatively simple because of the ease of use. So we allot 5 hours, but it's not really necessary. We get through it relatively quick, but we will take our time. If there are concerns, we'll make sure that we answer the questions and make sure the officers are comfortable. In addition, if the officers are not comfortable after the 5 hours, they still come back for additional training.
And through the chair, the policy. How many hours do they have to go through the policy for the body cameras, just the body cameras?
To the chair, to the councilman, again, the policy itself, they're going to go through the policy for approximately 2 to 3 hours, and then they'll be tested on it. But it's going to be ongoing training with our training academy. It's going to be part of our in-service, so it'll be ongoing training.
Okay. So the policy itself, the CPPA contract does not trump the policy?
To the chair, to the councilman, that's correct.
Okay. So when you say that immoral, Officer Moral through the chair, you said this. You said that we're looking at changing, or we may have to change some of the policy down the line based on how the camera's used out there and the whole lights as relates to if they turn it on and turn it off. How, on one hand, you're saying that this is the policy and it's not part of the contract, but yet we may discipline some individuals based on some changes that we need to make?
Chief Williams, want to respond?
Through the chair to the councilman, I made that statement. All of our policies are fluid policies. There's never a time that we set a policy and the policy is set in stone, it never changes. Because society changes, policing changes, technology changes. 10 years ago we didn't have body cameras. We have them now. So the policy is a fluid document, and we don't have to get permission from the unions to change our policies. Now, we have their input when we're looking at policies. They're on the committees. They have a direct line to myself and the other committee members for their input, but we don't have to get permission to change our policies.
Okay. So through the chair, when you put these out on the street in the 2nd district, I think, and the 4th district, to see if we were going to, in what direction we were to go in, how many of those recommendations that we take from the union to make the policy?
Through the chair to the councilman, I can't give you an exact number, but I know they're involved in the process.
So they were part of it. So they were sitting at the table, and they were part of the process of putting the policy together.
To the chair, to the councilman, they were not sitting at the table, but before we implement our policies, we send them a copy of the policy, and they're more than welcome to have their inputs, and they make their calls, and they do make their inputs. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to put those particular suggestions into our policy, but they do make their suggestions relative to the policy, but they receive copies of all of our policies.
Okay. On page 2 of your policy, under E and number 5, you said during the 360-degree walk around inspection of the designed police vehicle, an assigned police vehicle, make a WCS recording and verbally note any fresh damage. Do they do that now? And now it's just going to be video?
Through the chair to the councilman, that's correct.
All right. So does that include both in the car, internally and externally of the vehicle?
Through the chair to the councilman, that's correct.
So that includes the trunk?
Through the chair to the councilman, for any equipment that may be in the trunk, that's correct.
So the new equipment that the chief spoke of, the director spoke of yesterday, that now police officers are now going to have the first aid kits in the vehicles, those will now be inspected also?
Through the chair to the councilman, any equipment assigned to that vehicle, the vehicle itself will be inspected.
Okay. And the equipment itself, like the first aid kits that now are going to be in the vehicles?
Councilman, let's stay on body cameras. I know it was reported on the news last night, first aid. I don't want to talk about first aid. Let's talk about body cameras.
All right. So, Mr. Chairman, since I was the only council person at the Tri-C event with the DOJ and the mayor, and a person stepped forward to mention what I've said, and this is, and as you know, I've been asking for these cameras for over a decade. And at that time, I and Loomis were in full agreement, and people have asked, well, and I think you heard me, well, I think you were at Harvard when I mentioned why people are always asking me, why do you fight so hard for these cameras? And I explained to them then that, and I was happy to see at the Tri-C that someone got up and asked the mayor about the dash cams. Because there was an officer who was involved in a shooting on 151st and Kinsman. At that time, Director McGrath was the commander at that particular time. I know he remembers it very well because I was a freshman councilman at that particular time. And we all took the word of a senior citizen who had said that this young man had been shot by the police officer, and the police officer didn't have to shoot him. But then, doing a thorough investigation, we found out that the senior citizen could not see what she said she saw. And yet that police officer had to go through hell for a period of time until the evidence came out that that police officer had done the right thing when he had to shoot that particular person. And at that time, we had went out and we had done some protesting and we had done this, that, and in between. And since that period of time, I've asked that we put cameras in police cars. And I'm glad to see that we're moving in that direction. But at Tri-C, a person asked the mayor about the dash cams. And I was intrigued to now hear the mayor follow up with that question about, are you asking, should we have them both? And that's my question. Why can't we walk and chew gum at the same time? Why is it that if we're not going to have dash cams for all the vehicles? Because I don't buy into the thing about the money. We just spent $25 million on a bridge to nowhere. So why is it that at least the traffic cars, not all the cars?
So, Chief,
why is it?
Oh, I'm
Why
sorry,
is it?
Councilman.
Can I?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Certain traffic cars have the dash cams, and certain traffic cars don't have the dash cams. And I can understand maybe not putting them in all the cars, but the traffic cars are literally making traffic stops. And every bit of that will be recorded, because I disagree with you on that one picture when that person was the DUI stop, that could have been put on the dash cam. That didn't have to be placed on that. So why is it that we can't walk and chew gum at the same time, at least for the traffic cars,
Director,
to have dash cams?
Director, what are we going to do about dash cameras relative to traffic cars? And then the chief.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and council members and Councilman Reed, currently we are assessing doubling up these video cameras. In other words, once the body cameras are deployed, we are looking at also deploying dash cams in the vehicles. So we are currently looking at that now, and Mr. Larry Jones is the point on that, and he's been speccing out some prices, et cetera. So we're taking a look at it, sir, and at some point this year we'll make a decision if we're going to move forward with some dash cams in the vehicles.
Again, to my colleagues, we're going to begin budget hearings in 2 weeks. Whatever the initial acquisition costs are for dash cameras, which I think is a good technology, there has to be real good discipline on not only the administration but the council if this is a direction we want to go to put these into place, because the initial acquisition costs, you're going to add 20% operational maintenance costs just to keep them into place. So it's going to be a decision that the administrative and legislative branch are going to have to think long and hard. Chief, any comment to what the director said? And I want to turn it back over to Councilman Reed.
Through the chair of the Councilman Committee, as the director stated, we are looking at a dash cam program. We've taken our time and done our due diligence on the body cams to make sure that, first of all, it's the correct product. Second of all, that it's going to serve us in the correct and most efficient way, and that's why we decided on body cams in the first place. And that we actually roll out the deployment and the program itself in the most correct and efficient way. And we've done all that. And at the same time, we're also looking at dash cams and how that fits into the whole technology piece within the division and how that serves the citizens of the city.
Thank you, and I'm glad to hear that, because, you know, all those other cities that you've looked at, they have them both. And, you know, I've had the pleasure of working for 2 governors and 1 mayor, and the one thing that I've learned from them is that money's never a problem. So when we continue to hear this conversation about the aspect of the budget that we're going to be going through and the money aspect of it, you know, we find money for everything that we want to find money for. These products, and I'll never, just a few weeks ago I saw it on the Rachel Maddow show, where they had both, and they showed that one angle, as Officer Morrow said, one angle, if you would have just had the dash cam, it would not have shown that that police officer had to do what they had to do. But having the body camera on, it did. So I'm glad to hear, and I was glad to hear the mayor actually do a follow-up at Tri-C to that individual. Are you asking for us to have them both? And I'm glad to hear that we're moving in that direction. And last but not least, so when for the evaluation component with making changes to the policy, perhaps, how often will we look at doing that? Is it a yearly? Is it 6 months? Is it as events? And then my last question, because you can put them both together. When the public wants to see, for public records, what will they have to do to be able to see them? Not the media, because the media seems to be it. What if the public wants to see it?
Right. To the chair of the Councilman Committee, your first question, it's an ongoing evaluation process. We're not setting quarterly, biannually, yearly evaluations. We're going to evaluate this program as it goes on. As we get fully deployed in the 4th District, we'll take a real close look at deployment, policy, procedures to make sure things are on track before we even start in the 2nd District. So it's an ongoing evaluation process. As far as citizens' requests for video, they have to follow the same public records requests as everybody else.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Mitchell.
Thank you. Through the chair to the panel, I just have a question with regarding to the uploading possibilities when we have dash cameras or if we have a body cameras, with regard to the quickness, or basically what I've seemed to have heard is that an officer would have to go to the station to do uploading. So my question is regarding the uploading in the car, from the car, or for whatever, right, whether you're on the sidewalk, in the car.
So the upload speed, Councilwoman, how much does it take? Is that the question?
Is it possible? This is what I'm saying, because I seem to have heard that it was going to be downloaded when the officers returned to the district, rather than having things downloaded basically while this is happening, basically, or while you're in the car in case you have to hook up something in the car, basically. So I'm just trying to get that straight, basically.
Mr. Jones, you want to respond to the question?
Yes. Through the chair to the Councilwoman, one of the things we had to actually do for this project was create a dedicated camera network infrastructure at all of the 5 districts. So at the districts, you have your ordinary processes, say email, internet, everything else that an officer would normally do. We also put in new circuits at each of the districts now that's only the video traffic will ride that network. So that way, if officer docks that camera, for instance, we were at the 4th District yesterday, and officers docked some of their training videos, and we saw uploads probably within 5 minutes. So it really depends on the length of the video, but generally we want to make sure, basically build enough capacity where we want to make sure, say if that officer docks that camera at 8 a.m., we want to make sure by 12 p.m. all that data from that camera has been uploaded. So that was our goal in actually sizing out the infrastructure. And then when the DC mentioned also from the actual vehicle, well, in those, you might have an emergency situation where we need to get that video uploaded immediately. So that's something where we would actually take advantage of the infrastructure, the car modem in the car, where we can upload data via that way. That's not our ideal preference, just because that car also does their records management, it also does AVL, it does all these other functions. So we want to keep that car doing what it's normally doing, but for those emergency situations, we can utilize that actual vehicle to upload data.
Thank you. That really helps. Basically, I was just trying to, just to define when something could be uploaded from the car, et cetera. So I think that is really great. Also, to all of our chiefs and commanders, et cetera, that I'm very pleased that we do have really great police in our area, and that we're all working together. And so I'm, glad to have you here. And so thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I have 2 more council members on the list, but at this time, if there's anyone in the audience who wants to make a comment, I have a sign-up sheet over there. Please see the clerk and fill out your information, and then we'll call you when the council members are over. Councilman Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm very grateful that this has finally come to the city. I think I agree with Councilman Polensek that this is not only going to hold our police more accountable, but citizens more accountable as well. And you can't put a price tag on the safety of any citizen or any police officer, but I would like to touch a little bit on the RFPs that came through. Mr. Chairman, to the director, we had six vendors come through and we selected that submitted RFPs.
It was 11, to the chair, Councilman, it was 11.
No, what happened was just, I think what Councilman, when we did the initial pilot, they looked at 6 vendors. They utilized 2 vendors, a different one in the second, different one in the fourth. But when we did a rollout for this particular implementation, they put out an RFP and 11 proposals came back.
Okay, thank you. Where's TASER located? Headquarters? And did any of those RFPs come back from a local company?
Chief? Mr. Jones?
Through the chair to the council member, TASER is actually located in Scottsdale, Arizona. And as local companies, I believe we received 1 proposal back from a local company.
Okay. $299 a unit, $599 for the flex units. Is that just for the camera itself, or is that for the data as well? Does it include, I don't know what those were called. I forget what they called them. ETMs. The ETMs. Or does that price include the ETM, or is the ETM a separate charge?
Through the council member, through the chair to the council member, the docking station is actually a separate charge. So the camera, the $299 was just for the camera, any cords for connectivity, any chargers of that nature actually comes in that box. For the docking station, it is a separate cost, along with storage is a separate cost, and also the user license. So you have separate costs, just like, say, a cell phone. You get your basic phone, and then there's options of how you build out your plan.
Correct. The $299 and $599, in a previous employment that I had, in 2006 and late 2006, early 2007, we were able to equip the whole 2nd District Vice unit with body cams that are still in existence and they're still using today. We paid $90 for those cameras, and they're still working today. Any of those RFPs that came back, can you provide the council with the maximum and the minimum RFP that came back so that we can compare it to the price that TASER quoted us and that we used?
Through the chair to the council member, we can provide that information. One of the things I do want to outline is that we had certain specs that had to be met for these cameras. So what we saw was a range of different prices. However, a camera might be priced at $100, but it might not meet, we might have had 12 specs and it only might have met 4 of the specs. So as the chief mentioned, we want to provide our officers with the best equipment possible, and also we want to be conscious of the price. So in order to take both of those into consideration, that's how we ended up with this decision to purchase the TASER product.
I get that. And to the chairman, to Mr. Jones, those cameras that you purchased, I think T.C. Morrow indicated that there was a lifespan of 2 to 3 years on them. The cameras that the 2nd District Vice are still using today are going on 8 years old. So I just want to make sure that we're being cost effective in the use of, again, we can't put a price tag on safety for anybody, but I want to make sure that we're being cost effective when it comes to rolling out the cameras, not only today, but when we have to replace them in 2 and 3 years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Jeff Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During your time with the public at the meetings, can you give me an example of what was the most prevailing statements from the public relative to the subject in your meetings? Who can answer that?
D.C. Morrow or D.C. Drummond? What feedback did you get?
Chair, to the council members, some of the feedback we got from the citizens during our community engagement so far, most importantly, they wanted to know if the video could be altered or deleted by anyone, who would have access to the video. They wanted to know when it would be turned on, when it would not be turned on, to go in more detail about those areas were some of the most important questions that we got, that I thought initially.
How many meetings did you have?
Chair to the council member, we had 2 meetings so far. We have another 4 scheduled.
And just on that point, Director, I want to make sure that my colleagues are aware when those meetings are. Can you get me a copy of the remaining 4, and so I can share that with all my colleagues?
Yes, sir, we'll do that.
Councilman Johnson?
This equipment that we have finally decided to invest in, which I think is later than what was probably appropriate, we finally getting this done. The mistake is that equipment in and of itself is not going to hold any of these officers accountable. It is the supervisors. It is you. And personally, my confidence is shaken about the ability for you to even use this video to bring officers accountable should they be involved with the use of force. Give me a sense of what your oversight process. I know you've got folks reviewing the video, you've got some policies there, but in the end, this video will be used by you to determine whether there's been violations of administrative rules, and that process fits into the existing process. Just reiterate to me again how you're going to use this video as part of your overseeing of these officers' actions in the streets. And is it a police chief thing?
Chief?
Sure.
Everyone's looking at you.
Okay. Through the chair, Councilman, it's a tool, just like any other tool in investigation of violations by an officer, or it's part of the investigative process.
I've seen videos, particularly, Mr. Chairman, as part of this Northeast Ohio Media Group's series. I've seen videos that I personally found unacceptable, particularly Officer Simone's tasering somebody on his knees with his hands up, and then no discipline happening. So I just want to make sure we get a perspective here that this is not going to solve the problem of lack of discipline if you don't have a willing supervisory process or supervisors to do that. So for me, you're going to have to prove to me that this video is actually going to help discipline officers who go across the line, because in the past when we've had video evidence, it has not been the case. You don't have to respond. It is my belief that this video alone is not going to resolve the issues of lack of discipline by you, the supervisors. But ultimately, whether it's you in the seat or a successor, we'll see whether that helps. I believe, Mr. Chairman, I voted for this because I believe it is a tool, but a tool, as any tool, can be misused or not used properly by any supervisor or police chief or director. So the public needs you to actually do your jobs with this new equipment. The availability of the recorded materials to the media and citizens restate again to me, and I've read it in the handout. The request made by just let's say a media outlet for a particular video from a body camera relative to an incident, is it the same process you actually go through now when asking for information? Or has it been upgraded, enhanced, or changed?
Through the chair, Councilman, it's the same.
I'm aware of a significant criticism of your department, Mr. Chairman, Director, about how you respond to these requests and how long they take. Your department is notorious from my perspective, based on what I've heard, for dragging your feet in providing video, providing information. And I really would like to get a sense of whether you have internal standards in which you want to follow through on these requests by a certain time period. And do you have internal timetable in which you try to make sure you get a request in by a certain number of days? Do you have that internally? Anyone can answer that.
Chief, Director? I mean, is there a certain period of time that, I mean, if somebody asks something and it takes a year to get them, that's unacceptable. So that's point he's getting to. Deputy Chief?
Chair, to the council member, we aim to follow the law, and in our law, it gives a time frame on response to public records, and that's our goal.
And just on that point, I would ask that the Law Department, we have 2 Assistant Directors of Law here, send a copy of the Ohio Public Law and specifically call out what would be the applicable section that relates to the question that Councilman Johnson's asked. Send that to me so I can share it with my colleagues. Councilman Johnson?
Mr. Chairman, to Chief Morrow, your answer is non-responsive to me. Vague and non-responsive. Tell us and tell the public then, to answer my question, if you get a request for materials, information, since you have done this, you know what your average time is. So if you're going to follow to the T that the state gives you up to 6 months and it takes you 6 months on each one of the requests, I need to get a sense of what is your internal standards of responding to requests for public information. In this case, when you get a request for a video, I need to get an understanding of how many days, weeks, months we're talking about here. I don't need an answer that whatever the law says. You guys have been at this for quite a while. What is it now?
DC Drummond?
To the chair, to the councilman, once we receive a request, and specifically for the body cameras, once that comes in, whether to the chief's office, that information will then be sent to the mobile support. We added additional personnel to help us through that. That particular information will go to the mobile support, also to the law department, so its tracking number is placed on that. Once the mobile support gets that particular captured media, they have the responsibility, as you know, per the law, to redact certain information out. We currently have a software that we purchased to assist us in that endeavor to use pixelation and whatever else we need to redact that information. And that particular juncture, I'm not quite sure how long that would take, Councilman. I can't give you an exact number or days or hours because I'm not quite sure what the request will be. For an example, sir, if it's an incident that has, let's say, the 4th District on their second shift, it could be potentially 30 officers at a scene. With the 30 officers at the scene, if they all have cameras, they're capturing that particular camera based on our policy, the incident. The mobile support will have to get all 30 cameras, and let's just say, and I'm just using arbitrary numbers, let's just say that it's an hour long. So the mobile support unit will have to go through that particular, all those cameras, all the video, and if we have to redact, and we're trying to get software to assist us in our endeavor to redact, we have to go frame by frame. That's very time consuming, so it takes a long time. And again, I'm not trying to skirt your question. It just takes a long time. Once that's done by our mobile support, that information is then obviously sent to the law department for release to the person that requested that information.
Mr. Chairman, Chief, now let's do another example since you went extreme on me. Most of the cases that there is at the most 1 or 2 or 3 cameras involved. At some point, let me tell what you all owe this public. And I'm not just talking about the media, but what you owe this public, since the media is a primary source of providing information. What you owe the public is a sense of the average time it will take from an incident through the investigations, or even, in fact, you provide video even before your investigations are over with. You did it in the Tamir Rice case. So at some point, you have to tell this council and this public, what is the predictability of your actions and what is the predictability of a time? It is too vague. It is unacceptable. And it's not just video, it's other things you do. So at some point, you have to give me a sense of if I need information out of you, or a citizen, or my citizen needs information, that is public information. Then what we're talking about here. And I just think it's what you just told me with an example of 30 officers, it was dancing. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't expect them today, but I do expect this council to get a sense of public records response, particularly with this new data. There are some departments that do a heck of a lot better job than the public safety department. They take it more seriously. they prioritize it, they get it done, because they understand all that is public information. And this department is one of the worst departments in doing that. And I'm not confident that this video, if anything, you're going to find other reasons to be even much more problematic in getting them out. So I'm just red flagging some things.
Councilman, could I ask the chief to respond? But before you do, so, I mean, the essence of what Councilman's saying is, I mean, for the sake of good government, let's assume it was a 6-month period under the records law that you had to have it. I mean, we need to do our best and not send it in the last day before the 6-month period.
Right. Through the chair, the councilman, to your point, we definitely follow state law. If there are any times when we don't, there are things written in the state law that have repercussions for the division and for the city. If there's any time that the councilman has information that we haven't been timely in filling those requests, then that needs to be brought to our attention, and we'll see where the backlog is. But we've added additional personnel specifically for the camera project to fulfill those public records requests. We didn't have that in the past. And again, we're going to do everything we can to get out the information as quick as possible. And if it gets to a point where the councilman has a complaint from someone that we did not fulfill a request timely, then we need to be made aware of that so we can see where the problem is.
Mr. Chairman and Chief, so your position here today is that you timely respond to all requests? I just want to understand what your position today is, so that from this point, since you said I have to tell you when it's not being done, the presumption here, therefore, is that you're telling me that you timely respond to requests of the media and citizens for public information from your department. I just want to understand if that's your position right now.
Chief Chair, to the councilman, the Division of Police does everything possible to respond to every request within the law.
Is that a yes or no to my question? Do you timely do it? And I need to understand your standards. You can smile all you want. I need to understand your standards.
Yeah,
You're the leader, Mr. Chairman. You're the leader of this department, and at some point, get back to this council about what your personal standards are under the law.
So let me weigh in here, Chief, and
Since you're trying to say I have to tell you when you're not doing your job.
Councilman, quite frankly, I think the question and the response are both vague. And
My question is vague?
Councilman, please, I have the floor. I think the question and the comment, it was a yes or no question, and it was a very broad statement. I guess the point that the councilman's making, and I'm going to restate it again, Chief, for the sake of transparency, for the sake of the DOJ that's looking over our head and all the other stuff that's going on, we need to do as best of a job as we can to get timely information out and not sit on it. And there are some individuals in the community who feel, because we talk to them all the time, Chief, just let me get this all out and I want you to respond, that sometimes the police department isn't as expedient as they can be. And now we're going to bring in a new technology that's going to have a whole nother layer of stuff that's going to need to be shared with the appropriate mechanism to ask and receive that information. So that is just kind of, I think, something that's lingering and needs to be acknowledged. And you did kind of skirt the question, even though it was a very broad statement, but can you respond?
Through the chair, to the councilman and the committee, my response was based on the information that I have. If you're going to show me documentation that the Division of Police did not respond timely, then I can respond to that question. What I am going to say is that the members of the Cleveland Division of Police do not sit on public records requests, period.
Councilman.
What I received from your answer is that you believe that you are doing, the department is fine in its response to public. So at this point on, we can prove otherwise. And I'm saying to you what I've been told in my understanding. So since you throw it on my shoulders to show you, then you need to, I'm throwing it on your shoulders, come back to this council and show me for the last 6 months requests for public service, public documents, and when they were responded to. I want to challenge you to show this council of all the requests from media and from the public when they actually were received. Then we'll deal with it. Okay?
Councilman, that is a very, that would be a voluminous request to satisfy.
No, he just made a statement. He just made a statement here that everything's going fine. I'll even go. We can even go, Mr. Chairman. The point is,
You made a good point. I know your point.
but I don't voluminous or whatever. He can do the last 6 months, whatever the law allows for. he can, if there's a record keeping that every request for public documents has been recorded.
Right.
It is in there. And they are required to record when they respond.
Yep,
So I'm asking them to bring that to us.
sure.
And that, so that I can say I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I'll just give you a good
From the
example.
first request to the actual receiving.
And I'll just give you a good example, Chief. In November at a committee meeting, so that was, about 2.5 months ago, I made a request to get a copy of all use of deadly force incidents going back till
25 years.
25 years.
The
And
mayor.
I still haven't received that information. So I think you make a good point, Councilman Johnson. I think you've received it. I guess...
have one more question.
Yeah,
I'm ready to
sure,
move on.
I'm
I'm
going
ready
right
to move
back to you, Councilman. I just, again, the underlining sentiment is we're bringing in another layer of stuff. Call out what are those new employees that have been hired to do this type of work and share that with us, maybe even when we go through our pre-safety budget review with Director Dupas. Can you do that, Chief?
Through the chair of the council and the committee, we can do that.
Thank you. Councilman Johnson.
I may have missed this. Does the Police Review Commission have access to this video as part of their reviews?
Chief? Or Director?
Mr. Chairman, to the councilman, that is correct. They will have direct access to these videos.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. Councilman Kane.
Thank you. Briefly, through the chair, to the director or chief, and specific to the policy that was handed out this morning. The mobile support unit is a new unit, I'm assuming, or it's an existing unit?
Through the chair of the councilman, it's an existing unit.
Okay. But it will certainly need to be bolstered as this rolls out through the city.
And through the chair of the councilman, we have already added 4 additional members to that unit.
Okay. And then would that unit, is it anticipated that, and I'm unfortunately thinking as an evidentiary process and chain of evidence, would it be the mobile support unit OIC that would be testifying on chain of evidence and records retention and those types of things?
Through the chair of the councilman, the supervisor for that unit and also the officer that processed that evidence, correct?
Which would be every officer in the city, hopefully, eventually. But I'm just the requests are going to be on every single arrest, both from the state and from the defense. So it's, the challenges are going to be significant as this rolls out. So I'm just, whether it be an expert witness or a assigned individual to go through the chain of evidence, to go through, I just see this as unfortunately, as an overtime nightmare for the city of Cleveland. But most importantly, and the reason for the question is, is it anticipated that we wouldn't need a representative from TASER to come in for every court case?
Through the chair of the councilman, that's correct. We would not need a TASER rep.
It's clear that you guys have put a ton of work into this policy, and it is new policy. I just wanted to ask the question. And that goes to, through the chairman, the evidence.com and the evidence sync that's referred to in the policy. Are those City of Cleveland assets, or are those vendor assets?
D.C. Morrow?
Or if they're even assets, I don't know what to call them, frankly.
Chair, to the council member, those do not belong to the city of Cleveland. They actually belong to TASER.
Okay.
So they're proprietary software that we have a user right to, and that there is an assurance from this vendor that our archival data is going to be stored in perpetuity and secure for the information that needs long-term storage.
Chair, to the council member, that's correct.
Councilman.
Okay. Thank you. And again, I'm sure this is not their first rodeo, and we have some experience in it, but in a former career, every time they wanted a representative from the company in court to authenticate the process, they being the Constitution and those defending the Constitution and the person's rights. So as long as we're prepared for it. On the same line, through the chairman, I understand that there's docking fees, there's storage fees, and user fees. Is it anticipated that every member of the Cleveland Division of Police would have their own evidence.com login?
Chair, to the council member, that is correct.
Okay.
They have their own account.
And would there be an associated fee for the number of people who access their proprietary site?
Mr. Jones?
Through the chair to the council member. So as the DC mentioned before, the basic account, which is for patrol officers,
Right.
we pay a basic user license fee.
No matter how many?
No matter how many.
Perfect.
Each camera has a license attached to it.
Okay. And then quickly, just procedurally, as I understand it, and having read the policy, that member who's wearing the body camera at the end of the shift uploads it. And we're also encouraging them to tag or categorize significant events in their tour. And then if they did tag something, we're asking them to associate that with an RMS and make any kind of notes. So, again, I know that you guys have thought about it, but I'm stuck. If we're asking these frontline officers to come back to the house, type up their RMS reports, get them filed downtown and get a number back,
That's right.
and then upload their camera and tag and categorize and link it to a RMS report, I mean, I'm envisioning a lot of people in the office with this. I mean, I know that we ran through it with 2 hours, and then we're asking supervisors to type Form 1s, and
Yep.
just procedurally, and it's a work in process, Chief, I get that. I mean, we have to start somewhere, but what I don't want that has come out through the discussion today is that if they don't do it right, we want them to get a letter of reprimand. We want them, you know, what I'm hoping for, and I just need a brief assurance that, you know, somebody who's learning this process and maybe didn't tag or flag or categorize the right thing in their tour as they've just worked a 10-hour shift, that, you know, that we're going to work around the hard black and white language in the policy.
Chief, it's a great
The,
question.
Nutshell.
Yes, it is. Through the chair, the councilman, we know that there is a break-in period for this new technology for our procedures. We understand that. We've taken that in consideration. We also know, and we can look through our records to see the average number of assignments, say on our busiest shift, afternoon shift. I'd say it ranges from 8 assignments to 13 assignments. But not all of those assignments are going to, first of all, require an RMS report or any other report associated with those assignments. So our officers are given a CAD number when they receive the assignment, so they don't have to go back to get another number for an RMS report. So they already have that written on their duty report. So it's just the function of actually going in, pulling up that incident, and then placing that RMS or that CAD number on that video itself, along with a couple notes. So if you do that 8 times, you know, it should not take you 2 hours. It should take you all of 10 minutes.
That's good to know. It sounds very easy, but I'm just picturing somebody at the end of their tour after a crazy day trying to tag and categorize. And finally, just to that, the same kind of line on the retention policy and the days, and we categorize specifically how many days for what events. Is it the member's responsibility to, say you have a incident of a, I don't know, whatever it is, misdemeanor complaint, is it the officer's responsibility to tag that, and then that triggers the 180 days or the 1 year? Or is it, you know, the charging, the indictment that would go back and say, oh boy, we got to keep this for 5 years? At what point in the process does that happen?
To the councilman, to the chair, once the officer tags it and it goes into the category, that starts that process
Okay.
Right away. So, for example, if it's 180 days, starts that process once the officer tags it and places it into that category. Now, there may be a time where something comes up where we need the video longer. The officer may know that through the judicial process, what he or she can do, actually go back into it, tag it, so it can be removed from the 180 days and placed into a different category for a longer retention
We got to
period.
type a Form 1 first, as I read the policy, but that's my fault. And that's, so if, me personally, I'm probably not going to tag if I need to get somewhere, right? And I just wouldn't until I get yelled at, and then I would. But if I didn't do it, and it turned out to be something more significant, and the time is elapsing, you know what I mean? It's just, I just had a hard time envisioning that it's my responsibility upon uploading this data to trigger the retention policy of this document. And I think I'm just going to think out loud on this one, and we can see how it works. But, you know, I think the document itself is very well written. I think all of the policies that we've reviewed and the chair has given us as samples throughout the country, we've taken bits and pieces of the best policies throughout the country, and we've made it our own. So I commend all of you, and I know there was a whole committee of people that worked through this, and you know, and I commend you. I think it's going to be great. Thank you, Chairman.
What I
Chairman,
plan
on that point.
Sure. What I plan on doing at the 6-month period, probably sometime in early December or last week in November, I'm going to have all of you back just on this topic to kind of see how's it going, what's happening, how's our storage policy working, how's the officers adapting to using this type of technology. Councilman Reed?
Just on that point, I just want to make sure that a lot of our policy that's going forward, you adapted that policy from other police forces that have had to video in the field, come back to the office, download, make a report, tag it, and the whole lights. I'm assuming, because is that an accurate statement?
Chair, to the council member, that is correct. We've
All right,
looked at other cities and documentations on how their process works.
All right, yeah. And a lot of our policy is adapted because of that. Because when I hear the one person say, not here at the table, say that, you know, we got to be concerned that they're going to put the video on, they're going to run down the street and all this. Well, other units have had this, and they've ran down the street, and they've used this video
Right.
for years. and I'm assuming that other units have used it, and they had to go back, and it didn't take them 2 hours or 20 years to figure out how to do the report and get back out on the street to protect and serve. So I'm assuming that that's correct. And just to point, I just want to thank the chief, because at the Tri-C event, I came to the chief and said, Chief, could you come to the presentation on 119th and Kinsman that tonight, you know, was the last minute, because it goes back to what Councilman Johnson said. You know, I think our DOJ report is clear that the trust between our citizens and the police force is not where we want it to be. And for you to come out there and talk to the citizens in our community, we got to show a different face. And I was very appreciative to you personally coming out and speaking to the citizens. But that goes back to what Mr. Johnson said. We got to change this. And, you know, we got to put a different spin on what we're doing. If we did something before, you know, because it's all about trust to the citizens, you know, especially the African-American community. They just don't trust the police. And we got to change that. And we can do that by video and you making appearances like you did last week. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilman. So to the presenters, you're not going away anywhere. What I'd like you to do is all of you just get up and have a seat in the back. I have 2 people who'd like to make comments. This is not going to be Q&A. I'm going to have them come up, make a comment, and then I'm going to bring Chief, you, and the director, and anyone else for just kind of closing comments. So we'll bring up both together. Shelley Grayson and Bishop, is it Chewy? That's right. Bishop, come on up. Have a seat right there, please. We'll start ladies first. Introduce yourself, your name, and any statement you want to make.
I'm Shelley Grayson. As I'm sitting here, and I think this is a good first step for accountability, for the process of accountability, for citizens to feel a sense of trust in our police force. However, I think there's a need to take it one step further with the use of the data. I think the data also should be used for a tool for personnel review. I think that's vital. I mean, I would hate to see that this data is sitting somewhere and not being used for the purpose of holding full accountability for the actions of our officers. I also ask and wonder if there will be any type of penalty or repercussions for non-use. If officers decide to turn them off, what is the penalty for that action? Or if they decide not to use them? I've not heard any detail of what that looks like.
Okay.
I also heard that it's stated that this will be used for investigative purposes, but I think the community wants to know that this will be used for a full accountability process.
Okay, great. Bishop, tell us your name and make your statement, please.
My name is Bishop Chewy. I actually have questions and not just a statement. The first one is, are we to understand that the officers will have access to the camera footage to aid them in writing their reports? And if so, what would be the rationale behind that? And the second question is, how will the police department overcome the inefficiencies that already exist in the system? To Councilmember Keene and Johnson's points, they mentioned that we should expect an influx of requests. And since we already know it's difficult for the police department to respond to those requests, are they prepared to handle those requests? And is there a policy in place now that will dictate how the officers will access the camera footage online? And will they be able to access it from their own personal computers or just from the computer at the district station?
Good questions. Okay. Do you also, you said you had a statement to make? Because I wrote your 3 questions down, and I'm going to bring them back up to answer that, but...
Just those questions.
Okay. Thank you for joining us.
Will they also address my question?
I have those written down as well. Yes, so thank you for making statements here. Just have a seat in the back. Chief, you want to come back to the table? Mr. Jones, DC's, Morrow, and Drummond. Director. All right, I'm going to read the questions in order, and then I'd like the appropriate person to respond. So use of data and officer accountability. Assuming that an officer did something wrong, you have that data, you're going to be able to use that data to make sure that the appropriate accountability, whatever that is utilized.
All right, through the chair to the committee, and to answer the young lady's question, absolutely. As was stated in our presentation in the beginning, the purpose, one of the main purposes is accountability. We cannot have data on violations and not use it. So that's one of the main purposes. And also, there is a process to look at performance down the road as it pertains to certain goals of the division for individual officers, including myself.
Okay, great. And then will there be, hold on a second, let me get out all the question. And will there be, and I mean, I heard DC Drummond and Morrow both speak to the non-use of the camera and penalties associated, but that was a question that was asked. How do you or the two of you want to respond to that question?
Sure. Through the chair to the committee, there are penalties for not using the camera. There are penalties for using the equipment improperly. There are penalties attached to the camera program. So we can't put a tool out there and not have associating guidance and use and policies and procedures, and also penalties or corrective action if those policies and procedures aren't followed.
Councilman Conway, you had a question or a comment on this point?
When you mention penalties, through the chair to the chief, what about police officers arresting other police officers? Will the body camera be on, and will they be able to use it? I.e., if you had to arrest a police officer for, let's say, drunken, disordered, or whatever the case may be, or
Chief,
we'll be able to use that camera.
Yes, through the chair to the councilman and the committee, one of the main one of the main functions of the camera is to record arrest.
Right.
So that's the arrest of anybody that the officer makes during that shift. So yes.
What if they, what,
I know where you're going with this question. It's like, all right, you're my buddy, I'm an officer, I'm coming here, so I'll just keep the video off.
There you go, Chair.
That's the
There you
go.
the underlining premise of the comment. So, Chief,
Again, through the chair to the councilman and the committee, then there's a penalty for that.
okay.
and that rehearsal effect would be what? You tell
I'm
me
sorry, I didn't-
penalty, or either suspended or dismissed, or what?
Again, the penalties at my level are a written reprimand up to and including 10 days suspension. Anything over that goes to the safety director's office.
Thank you, Councilman. So next question.
On the point,
Yeah, Councilman Johnson?
so the young lady's, the answer to the young lady's question about what are the penalties associated with not turning on the camera is what you just laid out relative to you. Up to 10 days, if you feel it's egregious enough, that it will go to the safety director. So a person, an officer can be dismissed within the circumstances if part of it is that he's not or she's not turning on the camera. Can not turning on the camera be a dismissible penalty from the standpoint of the public safety director?
Chief, comment on that, and then Director, I want you to comment is if it gets to you, what happens then? Chief?
Because the chief cannot dismiss.
Chief?
That's why I went beyond him.
Exactly.
He made it clear he cannot dismiss an
Right,
officer.
right him up to 10. Chief, restate what you said, and then I want to hear the chief or the director respond.
Right. Through the chair of the councilman committee, Councilman Johnson is correct. I cannot dismiss an officer. Although I can make that recommendation, the director has that sole authority. But my corrective action lies between a written reprimand and a 10-day suspension.
Director, what happens when it gets to you?
Mr. Chairman, to the council persons and Councilman Johnson, when it comes to my office, my authority is beyond 10 days, up to 30 days, and termination. Now, it depends on the circumstances that are referenced when the chief makes the recommendation to my office, and I will provide that particular officer with the due process. But the violation is such that I feel that the officer should be terminated, that officer will be terminated.
So, Mr. Chairman, on my point on this, so if you feel that the failure to turn on the camera in a particular circumstances does allow for you, it does fall within your ability to dismiss the officer. If you feel that within the context of not turning on that camera, it has risen to that point.
Mr. Chairman, to Councilman Johnson, that is correct.
And just for the sake, Mr. Chairman, for you, Mr. Chairman, just to restate for the public, the reason why you can only do 30 days versus dismissal, is that a charter or is that a statutory or is that a collective bargaining? For you and the chief's disciplinary process? You know the rule.
And Mr. Chairman, to Councilman Johnson, I'm not absolutely positive, but I believe it's charter.
Okay, I just want someone to ask why can the chief not fire an officer? I want to be able to say, and Mr. Chairman, we need to kind of just confirm that with the law department.
Well, yeah, and I'm looking at our assistant directors of law because they have one request that I made that they're going to get me something in writing about relative to records retention and how it relates to this particular policy. Can you also respond, and I can put a memo in writing if I want, but I want you to hear it now so you can start working on it. What triggers this, the up to 10 days that the chief can do, 10 to 30 days, or dismissal that the director can do? Can you put that in writing? What triggers that relative to Councilman Johnson's question? Send that to me so I can share it with my colleagues. Thank you. So our next questioner, Chief, so will the officers have access to the video, the data, when they're writing their report, when they go back to the district?
Through the chair of the council and the committee, yes, they will. Part of the process of tagging the videos to make sure that everything that you're reporting is correct, to make sure that everything the witness stated is correct, to make sure of descriptions of vehicles, persons of interest, and things like that are correct and accurate in the record management system report. The officer also has to be able to tag that video based on those categories.
Right.
So they have to review that video.
Okay, great. And so, I mean, I kind of probed this question, but it was asked again, and I'm going to ask you to reply, and Councilman Johnson did as well. So your response is the police department prepared to handle the amount of requests that might come in for copies of video per our public records law?
Through the chair to the committee, I think we are. We're, again, in a fluid process, and if the need arises, we will increase those personnel to make sure that things are done within the law.
Okay. And the last question was, can a Cleveland police officer have access to the video from their home computer, separate from their work computer? And I guess the underlying premise there is their ability to tamper with that video that has been uploaded. Can you respond?
Through the chair to the committee, the simple answer is no. The officers will not be allowed to access the video from anything other than a divisional issued computer, be it a tablet, desktop, or smartphone, or MDC in the car.
So let me ask the question a different way, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Jones to comment. You can kick it off first. If it is a issued computer, tablet, whatever, and they're not on the clock and working, can they access the video?
Through the chair of the committee, yes, they can. But the system itself has an audit trail.
Got it.
So anybody that logs in this system has to first off have credentials to be able to log in.
Right.
And then that's tracked electronically. And any user's audit trail can be, basically a report can be printed out on their access to the system and exactly what videos they access within the
A
system.
more sophisticated Wikipedia, right? It'll create a footnote, who's went in there and who did what,
Correct.
what period.
Correct.
Time.
But through, Councilman, if I may, through the chair to the committee, officers will not at any time have the ability to alter or otherwise tamper with video.
Great, okay, and that was the question I was going to ask Mr. Jones. And great, well,
Mr. Chairman.
yes, Councilman Reed?
I just feel a need to say this, Mr. Chairman, because,
Sure.
I mean, a lot of I know we as city council have oversight,
Yep.
and we're supposed to do our job, and today we're doing doing our job. But I just feel a need to say this, because the premise of some of the questions and comments that are made are that, you know, that we got 1,500 police officers. And the vast majority of those police officers do a damn good job every single day.
Yep.
They go out on the front line to put their lives on the line for people they don't even know. So I don't want, you know, I just feel a need to say that, you know, although we're doing our job and we've done a very good job here today asking questions and making comments, you know, we all got to go, I think I need to go on the record, and I think we were at the church last night, and it was one of the biggest cheers that came out, is that these individuals are doing a damn good job. And just like any other organization, any other group, you've got some bad apples. And that's what the Justice Department pointed out. We got some bad apples that have done some bad things. But the vast majority of the men and women who go out there every single day to protect and serve are doing a damn good job. And of the 1,500, the vast majority of them are doing a good job. So, you know, some of the questions and some of the comments are under the premise that that some people might tamper and some people might do this and that may happen. But the vast majority are going to go out there and do their job in a professional way, and they're going to go out and protect and serve. They're going to go out and put their lives on the line for people they don't know, and we need to commend and thank them for what they do every single day for the citizens of the city of Cleveland.
Absolutely.
Chairman.
Mr.
Chairman.
Yes,
On that
Councilman
point.
Johnson?
I don't feel a need to, each time that we talk about potential misuse of equipment or procedures, whatever, to continue to make this disclaimer. Now, I ask the questions. I don't have to, every time we question whether something will be abused, that I have to do a caveat that all police officers are great, or most of them are. But let me just flip it. The majority of citizens in my neighborhood, in the city of Cleveland, the majority of citizens, black, white, Hispanic, are law-abiding citizens. And many of them have found themselves on the opposite side of mistreatment. So my questions are based on the misuse by police of equipment and of their decisions and judgment. So I need caveats for that. That Ms. Jones and Ms. Jones' nephew, or the gentleman who's put on his knees raises his hand because he's been alleged to have something and he's tased. Somebody needs a caveat for them. They get paid to protect and serve. I'm not going to give them praise every time I say something negative about one of their own. They should get that. I don't need a blue march. But someone needs to tell me why a Tamir Rice dies by doing something legal. I need caveats for them.
Well, I will never limit any council member for making a statement here at this table. It's certainly within their right. Every council member has 4 minutes to make whatever statement they want on the floor of council. I've heard a lot of statements being made over the past couple of months. I've agreed with many of them. I've shook my head at other things that have been said. But that's our individual right. That's why we're in the greatest country on the planet. And I appreciate how difficult the job is that we all have. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this evolves over time. Chief, we're going to get you back here in 6 months. We'll get a kind of a review to see how this is going, and I appreciate you bringing the whole team here. Any other comments before I conclude?
Just a miscellaneous question.
Sure.
And it's just it's a protocol question to the director, to the chief. Who plows the parking lots of the districts?
Because he wants to get them to plow his streets.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, to the councilman, it's my understanding that Public Works does the municipal buildings here in the city of Cleveland, including the districts.
Okay. So is there a protocol about plowing around the district houses? You see the snow around the 5th District? It's embarrassing. Alaska has less snow. I mean, I don't understand what this... I don't get it. I don't get it. You would think the district houses would be a priority to plow around them, where I wouldn't have police cars getting stuck in the streets around the district? I'm just raising it. I mean, I think there needs to be some... I think the chief and the safety director got to say to the Public Works Department, when the snow comes down, this has got to be a priority so we can get people, our men and women, out of the district houses, rather than getting stuck in the street.
Yep.
It's embarrassing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for all being here and those who came and testified. This committee meeting is adjourned.